Good afternoon and welcome to the Workforce Observer. We are very pleased to have with us today Stephen Koepp. He is editor-in-chief at From Day One, a conference series and journalism platform focused on innovative ways for companies to forge stronger relationships with their employees, customers, and the community. Welcome, Steve. I'm really excited to have you.
Thanks, Subadhra. Great to be here.
All right. So let me ask you, what inspired the creation of this platform and how do you see it addressing the needs of HR leaders in building stronger workplace relationships?
Well, I'm a lifelong journalist, and I saw the need back about 7 years ago when we were getting started to focus on the relationship between employers and their workers, but also their communities and customers too. But primarily over the last few years of our conferences and our journalism, we've really focused on all the events that have affected the workforce and the workplace and that relationship, whether it's been pandemic or racial justice movements or great resignations and all those sorts of things that we help HR professionals of all kinds, no matter their specialty, focus on those kinds of challenges and what they can do that in a practical way to offer solutions.
All right. So how are you seeing HR professionals evolving and adapting to current changes? From their perspective, tell us. Go ahead.
It changes a lot, and that's the thing, and that's what I think is vital about these conversations is that there's different needs and different demands as time goes on. There was a time when companies were bending over backwards to offer all kinds of new benefits and well-being help. And now the times are different. Companies are trying to do more with less. It's a time of tight budgets partly because of the economic uncertainty. Companies are hoarding their resources a little more. But at the same time, their workforce that they're dependent on is feeling that stress too. So they need help. So that's what they're looking for is how can we do things that will be appreciated by the workers, will help them, stay focused at a time when they're preoccupied and anxious.
At one time we would say, oh my gosh, this is an employees market. People are leaving jobs, finding other jobs or not. And then we said, oh no, it's moved. It's an employer's market. The advantage lies with the company. What would you call it now? I know it's uncertain, but if you had to characterize it, what would you say?
Well, during that time when companies were being so solicitous of their workers and hiring like crazy, I thought, what's going to happen is that the empire will strike back, to make a Star Wars reference there. But it is now the companies are more in the driver's seat. They have more leverage. Now that though is a very broad generalization because in some industries, they're still really hurting for talent or hiring a lot in certain areas, semiconductor manufacturing or healthcare. There's there's shortages all over the economy in like bus drivers and skilled tradespeople. So it depends. But by and large, in terms of the white collar workforce, they're definitely it's a marketplace where the companies are in command.
Yep, and that comes with its own set of challenges, I guess. Can you share one or two of really innovative strategies that you've seen companies use to connect with, their employees, their customers, and their communities? And what, in your opinion, made those strategies stand out? Because, I know you hear and talk to a lot of HR folks. So what have you seen that really caught your eye?
I think that one thing is that companies they spend a lot of money on things like benefits and things. And but employees are not always aware of them. So one thing that companies can do is reach out by all different media. Whether it's apps on people's phones for workers who don't sit at a desk with a computer, or it's having lunch and learn sessions, or it's sending written material to people's homes. It's like trying to basically reach out in all kinds of channels to make sure that the message gets through that, hey, we've got this benefit, or hey, we have opportunities you may not know about. That's one thing. Another thing is to be really transparent at a time when employees are feeling kind of trapped. They're worried about jumping ship at this point. So companies offer more career mobility and transparency about what other opportunities they might have in their company. And that could include like a talent marketplace where you could just look and see, oh, there's a job in another place, another type of job, another country. So really innovative things are happening in terms of helping companies and their workers find new paths to being fulfilled in your work.
Have you heard of the term boomerang employee?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about it? Because I thought that was super innovative and, different. And I know that companies in your, in your sphere are doing that. Can you talk a little bit about the boomerang employee?
Sure. Well, so companies invest a lot in their workers and training them, and advancing their careers. And then when they leave, companies might be resentful, or there goes, our investment walking out the door. Right. But sometimes they have a need to bring people back. And so some companies can kind of get past that resentment and think, well, let's hire that person back. And then what they've done is they've kind of recouped their investment. The person is a known quantity. That was a kind of a unwanted attrition, perhaps, for that person leaving, as they say. They bring those people back, they also probably have less of a onboarding. The whole ramp up process is faster if you're bringing somebody back in.
Right. Have you seen a lot of that, or at least some of it?
I don't have a statistical representation.
No, that's fine.
But people anecdotally you hear about it a lot.
Anything else that stood out that you have seen already being done? And it may not be something very common, but it'd be nice for our audience to hear about stuff that people are doing this to attract and connect with their workers.
I think social impact. I think like if companies have volunteer programs where they can do skilled volunteering based on their work skill, or just regular volunteering in any way they can. And also philanthropy, where there's like certain ways that you can give in a modest way to causes you believe in. And if a company can facilitate that's popular too. And it kind of shows there's meaning in the organization beyond just the profit. And companies that are thoughtful about it can do it in a way where it kind of aligns with what they do. If it's a food company, they're involved in a food bank. They're feeding people. It's another way of kind of making workers feel more bonded, more engaged, and also meet one another, outside of their work silos.
I've been reading about how CHROs are gaining more in power. They already have a seat at this table. They are in the C-suite, but now because they know the workers, they know how the strengths and the weaknesses of who's being hired, who's not, what is needed. They are having a larger say. Can you outline to me in a CHRO success story that you are familiar with? And it doesn't have to be in great depth, but something that you've seen, which has been like, oh wow, that is interesting. This person is a CHRO and has.
There's many, and we often have CHROs as like the kind of opening fireside chat at our conference. Conferences, plural. There's about usually 20 a year across the country. One in particular who I think of is the CHRO of United Airlines. Okay. And she was very, she gave a chat in Chicago. That's their headquarters, and really spoke a lot about talent development. Because airlines, especially coming out of the pandemic, we'll see where it goes with the economy right at the moment, but coming out of the pandemic, they had tremendous growth and in business, and they needed pilots and flight attendants and all kinds of folks. And they, at United Airlines, specifically set up a flight academy for pilots, including opportunities for people to rise up through the ranks and be pilots. And go. It was in Denver where they established it, and it was like taking this workforce need, and doing it yourself, but doing it in a way that you could trust. That's professional. That's in terms of teaching these sorts of skills. So she's very activist about that, but also kind of empowering people up and down the line in terms of customer relations. You have to really give a sense to the agents and the flight attendants and everybody else that they are empowered to make decisions to help smooth the way for things, or with safety, and it's even more dramatic. But in terms of customer relations, she was the CHRO very intent on developing those skills.
Right. And so when they talk about developing the skills, are they offering training, like workshops? Are you seeing a lot of that as well? I mean, I guess that was then, but today is slightly different, right?
Well, and the learning and development methods have gotten more sophisticated and customized to what works best. So it might be on-demand learning at home, online. It might be in a more learn as you go, kind of learning on the job methodology, or in a group. It used to be just a class. It used to be like school. I think now it's become more, enabled by AI and lots of other technologies, but also a recognition too that sometimes it's human contact and mentoring are as important as, just the lessons.
Well, we are in a different time, right? I mean, post-COVID, a lot of growth, and people were hiring, but now you got to do a lot more with very little. So what are the trends that you are seeing? Because I know that HR managers, CHROs are under a lot of pressure to foster engagement and retention. So what trends are you seeing in how they approach these challenges?
And retention. Yeah, and things like that.
Yep. Engagement, retention.
Well, one thing too is it's been a super hot button issue, the whole issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think no matter what the companies, how they publicly portray those efforts and commitments now, given the political situation, they very much seem determined. I'm talking about big employers and medium and small, but to focus on the sense of inclusion and belonging and making people belong, no matter who they are. And there's so many. There's so many. This is often seen in terms of race or terms like that, but there are so many aspects to this, including people with disabilities and their ability to return to the office or work from home. There are lots of nuances underneath all those big blaring headlines in terms of how you make a workforce work at their best, depending on who they are, what their capabilities are, and so on. And so I think companies have stuck with that inclusion part and giving people a sense that they belong, which makes them more engaged. So I think there's been a more, in the last year or so, a more subtle approach to this.
I was going to dive into that, but I'll do it in a bit. So despite what the bigger headlines are saying, there's a quiet effort to make people feel inclusive. What is happening on the benefits front? Because I know that people were offering all kinds of things a few years ago, but I don't think that's the case anymore. What are you seeing in terms of both benefits and the flexibility on work, return to office?
Well, the flexibility and work, there again, to refer to the big headlines, some very high-profile companies, whether it was Amazon or JP Morgan Chase, told people they had to come back to the office basically 5 days a week, and that got a lot of attention. But we talked to, at one of our conferences, Nicholas Bloom at Stanford, who does all, really a lot of research on this. And he said that the reality is that a lot of companies have really stuck to flexible work rules because they found they can attract and retain a bigger pool of workers that way, that it's more inclusive because some people can't just show up 5 days a week at the office. And it has a lot of other competitive benefits for them. So it's not just being nice, it actually is makes them
more productive, probably.
Yeah, and some people are more productive that way. So he was saying that's borne out in his research. Other things that companies do is that they've and besides the flexibility is, because of cost measures, concerns, they've wanted to consolidate some of the point solutions, as they're called. There have been so many new things, from pet insurance to other, very focused solutions, and some of them important ones like musculoskeletal pain relief and other, things for very specific issues for workers. But they've been trying to figure out how can we kind of consolidate these so we were using the ones that work, and we're making sure that they're deployed not in just a wholesale shotgun kind of way, but that we're using ones that are the ones that are really effective, that workers really appreciate and have good outcomes. So there's been a kind of more discipline in analyzing the benefits and making sure that they're getting a good return on their investment in that area.
Cool.
So those are some of the things.
Yeah, no, that is helpful. And I want to ask the question, what went wrong with DEI and a two-parter, and where do you think it's heading? People say all kinds of things, and I'm not going to get into the bigger headlines, smaller headlines, what's going on. But in your opinion, just from your perch.
I think it tended to overreach in terms of in a way that made people feel excluded. So it was supposed to be about inclusion, but certain people did not feel included, and there was a kind of a backlash. Whether even if people who weren't like activists and political rabble rousers or reactionaries or whatever you want to call them, but even just a lot of regular people felt it went too far in terms of trying to modify people's behavior. There's some evidence in the research that the anti-bias training would sometimes not work. It would feel intrusive. People felt like browbeaten or shamed, or it created a lot of emotions where people felt clueless or shamed or excluded or you name it. And it's a big, all people are different. So there was enough of that out there that it politically became a problem. Now, the underlying principles is that there are massive structural, big and small, obstacles for people, marginalized folks, for getting ahead. You see it, it's, this research will show, statistics show, that there's not the representation really lags. So then it becomes, well, okay, if there are legal and political and social obstacles to having things like goals for diversity, then what can you do? And so I think a lot of companies are looking at that, like how else can we approach this? But to get right back to your question of what went wrong, I think there was an overreach and a backlash. There was a need to have it, but as things go in the ebb and flow of social change, it kind of went a little too far and was a little ham-handed in some ways.
And now what? I mean, I know the pendulum has swung the other way, right? It's just too far one way and then now too far another way. So now what? Is it like basically coming to a middle of the road? And what does the middle of the road look like?
I think one thing that we're seeing is thoughtful companies are trying to find out how can we take those jobs focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion specifically and broaden them. So you might have, I interviewed the top executive at Starbucks who is now in charge of talent and inclusion. So those are things that are where his purview is everyone, not just a certain disenfranchised or marginalized few, but everybody. And so his focus frames it in a different way, that there's talent out there and inside the company that may be overlooked, no matter for what reason. And not a narrow set of reasons, but whatever reason, and how can companies be more expansive in measuring that? So I think there's a kind of a realignment there, and the thing is, right now, of course, there's in some businesses there's just they're full, they're not hiring. So what can they do to expand diversity when they're not hiring? But the thing is that in the long haul, there will be a shortage of workers, just demographically, the baby bust. So companies that want to take a long-term view will need to still keep focusing on how do we develop that talent pipeline in a way that doesn't leave people out. And also in certain industries, they're desperate too, so to find people inside or outside the organization and not overlook those sources of talent that could provide talent, as long as you bring talent along in a way that skills them and prepares them for the challenges that they'll face.
I mean, from DEI to AI, what are you seeing around AI and HR?
Well, I think there was some trepidation at first among HR people because
Okay.
people don't go into HR because they're technicians generally. They're people. But in just
Right.
very rapidly, though, you've
Right.
seen HR people start. And this is a very generalized way to put it because
Anecdotally.
there are
Yeah.
some who are maybe resistant to dealing with that, and others who embrace it right away, and they start
Right.
using AI to plan their parties or plant their garden, or they're just using it in all different. They're early adopters. But
Right.
the one trend in the past year with AI and HR is that the folks in the profession have realized a lot of our work is really drudgery. It's like a lot of administrative stuff. And
Right.
if we can use new tools to take care of some of that stuff,
Right.
we can spend more time with people. We can
Right.
do, whether it's interviews or maintaining relationships with prospective hires over time a little bit, following
Right.
people's careers.
Right.
It can kind of actually help them do more of what they originally went into the field for. So that's dawning at people, and especially, I mean, it can get quite specific. Whether if you're in talent acquisition, it can
Right.
it can be for screening people in a more efficient way, AI-powered interviews, all kinds of things where
Kinds of
the
things.
final
Yeah.
decisions are made by the machine, but it's assisted. People are
Yep.
assisted in finding and confirming the skills of people.
I'm hearing a lot in the world of work, this whole world that we inhabit. I'm hearing that a lot. So, your platform combines journalism and live events, right? What
Hmm.
role do you think storytelling plays in helping companies strengthen their relationships with key stakeholders? And how does your conference series help them stay ahead? I mean, I think it's two parts, but
Yeah. Well, data is very important, and we know that now because data, well, it can lie, but a lot of time, but it can actually give you a sense of reality in terms of like how people are performing or how people feel. So surveys, studies, all that is important. But I think that um, the it's really important for people to focus on human relationships part of
right.
HR and so on, and how, and that's really what things come down to. What was the second part was, I think you were talking about our conferences. I think how it helps people stay in touch is by meeting each other. That's one of the key things, the networking.
Okay. Okay.
But also us having a sense of what are the roadblocks or challenges or obstacles out there, and how are people who are really in the trenches, so to speak, how are they dealing with that? What do they invent? A lot of invention goes on, not just in academia. I mean, certainly we have lots of authors who speak at our events, and they are
Right.
very good at conceptualizing issues. But then the people who are, the vice presidents and the directors and so on are actually experimenting and trying things to the extent that they
Right.
can. And when sometimes
Right.
they have a breakthrough and they share it with our audience is very appreciative. They and all the feedback we get is, what can we take back to the office or the workplace and use?
Right.
And sometimes they'll
Actionable items.
have,
Actionable.
particular,
Yeah.
action
Right.
items, innovations, tricks and
Sure.
tips, things
Right. Right.
that will help them in very complicated jobs that are
Right.
also changing all the time.
And so you think by telling their stories, it kind of spreads the word and it links people.
Yeah, I think, that's to get at your
That's fair.
point. Yes, between the data and the storytelling, stories can be obviously misleading, but stories
Right.
can also help people's minds get around a complicated set of facts, and
Right.
also be encouraged to follow a path where they don't exactly know where it's going to go. I mean, often we frame things in a sort of as it's like 3-act play or a 3-act narrative of what's the obstacle, what's this challenge you haven't faced before, what's a
Right.
solution you tried that maybe worked, and then what was
Right.
the outcome? What was
Right.
what was the happy outcome, or what went wrong? Because
Right.
that's instructive too. So
Oh, right.
people
Right.
say we don't, sometimes they'll say we don't do that anymore, but now we're doing something else.
Right. Right. Well, that's great. Thanks. One piece of advice you'd give to an HR professional, who's struggling to bridge the gap between company goals and maybe employee and community expectations, there's a gap. What would you say to those?
It just we were just talking with a person from a big Hollywood talent agency, and she said that it was she's a big talent agency. She had twins, and those are that's a difficult workplace environment. It's stressful, and she really made a point of telling her story to get at what you were saying, and trying to do everything to change the culture. And she did it a lot by just one-on-one relationships and chats, and just knowing, well, okay, what are women facing in our organization? A lot of them leave, but their talent, is lost then. So what can we do, and how can I relate my experience to the many other people in the organization? And so I would say, staying in touch with people and listening a lot, whether it's by surveys or one-on-one. Just stay connected.
That's cool. And in terms of looking ahead, how do you think the role of HR will evolve in building these relationships? What do you see happening in the world of HR?
I think, technology will have a huge impact. That's for sure. But I think, it will continue to evolve in the sense of companies know that the pandemic kind of proved a breakthrough in that suddenly the HR people were in charge of the work roles. They had to be. It was all new stuff, and CEOs and CFOs and CTOs, maybe to some degree, were not, prepared to make those sorts of decisions and research and things like that. I think it'll continue to evolve as new challenges. That kind of model will keep people managers or chief people officers or whatever they might be called connected. If it's they will be an important role but they'll have to adapt to the crisis of the time. That might be a talent shortage. It might be a skills shortage. It might be right now it's people are anxious and stressed and not focusing on their work perhaps. So they're needing to respond to that. So I think it'll keep getting reinforced that there will always be some new challenge that where people officers, people managers need to be there.
Right. And you mentioned this, and it kind of piqued my curiosity. You said, one way of staying is you can stay in touch one-on-one. What did you mean by that? Like stay in touch one-on-one? Do you mean like? Not through surveys. In other words, with direct conversations with people, and but it can be in all different formats. It could be your volunteer group. There's a new platform that's being offered to companies that pairs people not in the traditional employee resource group way of identity groups, but more about what you might have in common that you don't know about. Or in other words, it inventories people. You take a little quiz, or maybe kind of not a little quiz, and then you through matchmaking, probably through an algorithm, you paired in a group of people who might have a bunch of things in common, and then you can in these groups. Let's talk about the issues you face at home, at work, in the public arena, wherever. So I think that's a nice, interesting, new experimental way to do it. That doesn't necessarily sort people according to just identity. It's more like interests. And it adds another dimension, and so that was pretty fascinating. Well, that's very cool. Thank you. It's been great talking to you. Really appreciate your time, and look forward to doing this again. Thanks.
It's been a pleasure, and congratulations on this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks.
Great area of focus. Thanks, Subadhra.